times teens come to us or parents bring them to us, and they're basically saying that they're having a major conflict, that their teens are misbehaving. It's got to be some reasons why that is. But there are 8 typical types of transitionings that happen with adolescence. So between the time that puberty is starting and ending, there's a lot of hormonal changes that go on, and part of that hormonal is also trying to growth into independence. A lot of times you hear 3-year-olds are like, oh well, the 2-year-olds are the terrible twos, but it's really more the independent pre-threes. And so they're starting to learn an autonomy. Same thing happens around the developmental phase between teens and going into adolescence, which is around 11, 12, 13. Sometimes 14. And by the time 15 and 16, they're starting to practice all the skills. So there can be an increased moodiness. That's what we get all the time, is there's an increased moodiness. Then you have increased consciousness. So they're more aware of inconsistencies. And they usually will start pointing it out at this point because they're more inquiring. Inferences of like, hey, well, you said this, but then now you're doing this. Isn't that inconsistent? So they're trying to more, and it does come off more derogatory because it's confusing to them. And at that same point, their voices are changing. A lot of the boys' voices are starting to get deeper, so it sounds more scary or more threatening. And then you have an increased dawdling. So they dawdle. They're wandering. They're pondering. And then you have a lot of parent conflicts. So this is where adolescents really start. They're switching classes. They're all in testing, so they can't even come and see me yet. So I'm working with a lot of the teens right now, and that is the biggest theme is there's a lot of conflicts. And so a lot of times parents will bring us there's students saying, well, they're being disrespectful and rude. And it's more of they're trying to learn how to effectively conversate. And usually that's when the parent will ignore and not listen. And most of the times it's the teen is talking, the parent's just not listening. And I've noticed that a lot of times that I'll have this conversation with a parent when they bring their kid in, and I'll be like, well, maybe they're saying it and you're just not hearing it. And they say, no, they're doing it very disrespectfully and rude, and they don't need to speak like that. And that's where the transition happens. It's their pre-adulthood that's happening. And yeah, they're effective communicating, but all we do is help shift how they transmit that conversation. But the change goes is the parent actually is hearing when they get, well, that's just too much. I cannot believe that happened. And it's like, no, they've been saying it the whole time. They just had to use a different set of words. And then there's also an increased risk or a sense of invulnerability. And so this is more of they're seeking more of a sensational pleasure. They may lie that they've earned certain what they call street cred, or they may experiment or lie about experimenting. This is also the time when they start experimenting with drugs and alcohol or risky behaviors to more of an inclusion, or it's just like a trial and error. Is this giving me a pleasure? And so this is when sexual activity starts happening. So the conversations of how do you have healthy relationships has to start way back when they're like 4 or 5. And then it's more of role modeling at that point. And so if you notice that I talk about attachment style a lot, and I've identified a lot of different characteristics, but a lot of diagnostics that are role modeled. So if you're getting involved with some of these people and you notice red flags, think about your children. If you can't change them, they have to change themselves. A lot of it is a personality, and personality disorders is all about self-change. And so that's kind of where these teens are kind of experimenting now. They also have a high levels of stress. So if you notice, teens will have an increased headaches, but then they'll also have a lot of, dawdling. They'll tune out, and it's more of it's overwhelming that it's not avoiding, but it's a neurological avoiding. So they will have a huge shift of stress going from middle school to high school. And most people will notice around 9th grade, well, they didn't have this before they got to you. And it's like, yeah, but your kid's also coming into high school. There's a whole level of peer influence, but also a level of you got to fake till you make it, or you may not survive high school if you don't play a certain level of social politics. And if you're in a sports, then you have a sports politics that you have to go. And you're challenging, but you can't challenge too much, but you have to show some kind of individuality, but you can't be too individual. And so that's where the niche is. And sometimes it's so stressful that they bark off, and they come off disrespectful. And so they just kind of have to put themselves in check, and to recognize that maybe they're overwhelmed at that point, and then help them find a different set of word, because they will become more argumentative, like, no, you're not hearing me. And it's because they can't find the effective word. So a lot of times, and recently, if they get to working with a therapist about 8-9 sessions, then the parents are like, no, this is not working. They're starting to become more argumentative, and it's more of, no, they're trying to identify which word pattern works best for which set of adults. And so if you're not wanting that used to having those words used in your home, then you have to help guide them with those words. There's also a big caveat where parents are stuck and fixated that their kids do whatever they want to do, and they have to realize that they need to step back, that your kid's pretty much done 12, 13, 14, and now they have to be guided on what is more effective, what is going to bring more bees to the hive, is kind of what I say, and not have the bear destroy the whole hive. And so it's more of trying to figure out how to have those effective conversations, but the parents need to step back a little bit and realize that they're not little kids anymore, that they're not, the I, and the T, and everything that surrounds this kid's world anymore, that now you got to see what you created, and how do you help mold the pre-adult in business talk, in professional talk, in relationship talk, is you now have to convert it to more of a guide instead of a dictating parent style, and authoritative, um, kind of derogatory ways. You don't want to do those anymore. You now have to be open to hearing stuff. And this is the hardest part, where you're going to hear stuff that your kids have noticed, and they find the inconsistency, and they're going to find inconsistency. That's what they do. And they're going to challenge the family dynamics, because they're all ready to break off and make their own family dynamics. That's kind of where it is, but it takes years, 3-4 years for them to break off. And you don't want to start it earlier, but they are going to become more argumentative, because they're trying to identify, how do I create my own dynamics, and what values am I going to bring to? So where I'm arguing with my parent, but I'm wondering, are they going to be able to argue and give me a good argument, so I can take that value of whatever importance it is to them, whatever their argument is. It could be dishes. Why do I have to do dishes this way? If you can perform a good argument or a defense, an argument doesn't mean fight. Argument is, can I propose a good solution, problem, and situations that guide that this is the order of operations that I have to do, and that you should do, because it gives us the best product. That's what an argument is. If it gets to character assassinations, then that is so disastrous in an argument, and that's not effective communicating. So to teach your children effective communication, you have to role model it, but you also have to step back and respect that at some point these kids are going to argue back with you, and it's because did you do what you have to do as a parent, and tell me this is how we have to do it, and can you now give me the reasons why you did it that way, and why I should continue that tradition in my family. That's all about effective. And then it's also, parents, step back out of your ego, because they're not going to take everything that you give them. They may mold it into their own way, and that in itself is, you did your job. So a lot of the conflict is that most of the conflict is that a parent takes it as an ego. No, you do it my way, and now you're telling me that I'm wrong. They're not technically telling you you're wrong. They're telling you, I don't want that part anymore. I'm growing up. And it's just, they can't say that I'm growing up. And sometimes parents can't accept it, that they're growing up. I know, it's sad. We have to say goodbye, but it's not, they're gone, because now they have to adult, and they're going to come to you for some advice. You would hope that they would come to you for some more advice as you grow. So when they come to a therapist, that's all we're teaching them. We're teaching them effectively communicating to you. We're teaching them how to maybe counter propose, maybe set that argument in a different way. We're not going to change them. We're hearing them. We're just saying that, how do we get other people, especially your parents, to hear you more? And so if you're taken aback of, oh my God, they're starting it with me. No, maybe it's you're finally hearing them. You should be proud of them. You should be proud of yourself. Because if they're coming to argue with you, then your opinion matters. Listen to them. Guide them. Because you matter. They matter. All right. So that's the 8. I'm going to list the 8 typical adolescence, behaviors that can be presented, that most of us find that it's the teens being rebellious, but they're typical behaviors that happen. And there's some biological, a lot of biological, but there's also social factors. They are trying to grow into their own little family. And it's before another relationship gets involved. There are some that are a little bit more concerning. And so those are the ones I'll put a star next to, is the concerning ones, because that's where more psychoeducation has to come in. And you have to really start it early, around 8, 9 years old. Some of the, especially the drugs and the risky behaviors. All right. Well, until then, just don't, recognize there's a purpose and the reasons, and attachment is very important. Love is really what it is. And that's the theme that I talk about all the time, and the kids, and hopefully the parents know. And sometimes I don't always get that, recognition, but it really is I'm not trying to be mean or derogatory, and I think everybody's great. I just think people don't listen to each other as well, and I'm falling into that too. And really all I want is we can make better people. We can create better environments if we put certain boundaries up, but then we give space for people to heal. So even narcissists and histrionic is how I say it, but and even those that have borderline and bipolars, ADHD, sometimes they just need a little space. All right, until then, listen. You're important, and your opinion matters, and so does your kids.